Set up our logos and we spread them like water across the whole thing. Seniors, they do something.
Call this meeting of the Dell Rapids City Council to order, and welcome to those of you attending the meeting this evening, and welcome to those who might be watching via the webcam. Hope you're all staying nice and warm and toasty. We'll ask the Finance Officer to please call the roll.
Hawk?
Here.
Chris?
Here.
Garrett?
Here.
Borchert? Schmidt?
Here.
Berg?
Here.
Ronstachen? Meyer?
Here.
Mayor Early?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have the agenda for the meeting this evening.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Bob to approve the agenda, seconded by Gary. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. We have the minutes from the January 6th regular meeting.
Move to approve.
Moved by Bill to approve,
I'll second that.
seconded by Mike. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Next is visitors to be heard who are not on the agenda, but we don't have anyone here, I believe, doing that, so we'll move right on to our consent agenda.
Our consent agenda is the one outdoor event permit, the American Cancer Society Relay for Life here in Dell Rapids to be held on Friday, July 24th. The fee would be waived if according to the recommendation on the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Moved by,
Waive the fee.
moved by Mark to approve the event permit with waiving the fee. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bob. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Next, on the agenda under old business, this is the night where we get to hear the results of the Transportation Master Plan. Justin.
Wade Klein with KLJ is here this evening to present to the council. So this link to the full plan has been provided to the council. So please take some time to go over it. This is, I think, Wade's going to go over kind of a condensed version. So let's listen to Wade and present any questions that the council may have.
Thanks, Justin. Mayor Early, appreciate the opportunity here. There is a handout in front of you. I'll walk through that kind of page by page. I know a few of you participated in some of the meetings we had over the past 9-10 months. So some of this, particularly those of you we saw in December, hopefully this should be old news, but for those council members who maybe did not participate in any of those meetings, maybe just getting familiarized with the plan, I'll kind of hit some of the highlights and then open it up for questions. So if you open up the handout on the inside page there, just the overview, talk a little bit about some of the pavement management recommendations that we developed, talk a little bit about some of the traffic operations analysis that we developed. We do develop a major streets plan and some kind of area-wide recommendations for the city, some bicycle and pedestrian system recommendations, and that'll be kind of what I'll cover here. So the next page there, the pavement management program, one of the most significant tasks that we were asked to complete was what we call a PASER rating. It's basically kind of a windshield review of pavement conditions in the community. So we assessed the 21 miles of pavement conditions in the city of Dell Rapids. And what you see there in your handout is our pavement condition rating. 10 is really good, 1 is really bad. So anything in green is good, anything that starts to get to yellow starts to be so-so, and then anything in red is not so good. And so that provides a base condition. If you turn the page, we kind of put some of that in tabular format there, so you can see what we call our PASER distribution. So, you know, how do your miles that we evaluated shake out? And we didn't evaluate any of the mileage that's going to be reconstructed over the next couple of years. We figured that was going to get reset back up to 10, so we didn't evaluate those miles. But for the miles that we evaluated, you can see you've got a pretty interesting spread across the parameter. You know, you've got about half your system is kind of that 6 to 10 You know, those are the kinds of roadways that you would just kind of continue to treat, kind of like Clarence is doing now with kind of some chip seals and those kinds of things. Just a regular, you know, every 5 to 7 year kind of maintenance program. When we start getting to the 5s, that's about a 20% of your system. You know, those are the roadways that you need to kind of start to take a look at, maybe some minor rehab work. That would be kind of an overlay. As we start getting into our 3s and 4s, we see more significant work is needed. And then our 1s and 2s, you know, portions of 3rd Street would be a good example of that. Some other corridors, you're kind of getting to that part where, you know, an overlay is just not gonna cut it. You know, you kind of get into more of a full reconstruction. You know, fortunately, that's a pretty small component of the overall community. So when you look on the bottom page there, when you talk about type of service needed, you know, based on the recommendations, then kind of that green to red, it just kind of gives you a sense of, you know, what type of service is needed. So anything that's in the green is really just kind of that preventative maintenance, and again, that's most of your system. Anything that's gonna be in the yellows, that's your minor rehab, and then you get your minor rehab with a little bit of a more significant overlay, and then anything in red is really stuff that, you know, you might wanna consider for more of a full reconstruction. If you flip the page, kind of looking at how do we start to develop some system needs, you know, we did some cost estimating based on, you know, chip and crack seal cost, the number of miles that you have, some minor rehab, where you have a little bit more of a significant mill and overlay, and then your full reconstruction. So if you went out there this spring and said, you know what, we're gonna do the whole system, you'd have about $5 million worth of needs. Now, obviously, you're not gonna do that. The point of doing this was to figure out, you know, how do we incrementally, you know, build upon the pretty decent pavement management program that Justin and Clarence have currently. So what we did is we did some implementation scenarios on that next slide, just to try to give you a sense of, you know, could you do a more aggressive scenario, could you do a moderate scenario, or would you do what you might call sort of an enhanced status quo? You know, based on the work that we did, you know, it looked like you were maybe around $300,000 a year in pavement work. So when you look at the bottom there, you look at that enhanced status quo, you know, that'd be something very similar to what you have. The strategy there is that over a 15-year cycle, you're trying to get all that backlog. And when I say backlog, I mean that stuff that's really a 3 or 4, pushing a 5. You're trying to get ahead of it, because the key with pavement management is just like anything else, you don't want to fall behind. You know, once you get, you know, like this year you did some work up on Clark, or on 10th, you know, when you do a nice overlay project like that, the key is to keep it, you know, it's at a 9 now, it's gonna be an 8, a 7, you know, you wanna get back out there with a chip seal or a crack seal, you know, you bring it back up, you wanna, it's like our teeth, you know, you wanna basically keep that enamel strong. So the scenarios that we developed really have to do with anything, you know, with an enhanced status quo, a moderate scenario, or maybe your backlog is addressed over a 10-year period, or an aggressive scenario, which is probably cost prohibitive for a community your size, is you're trying to get that backlog in the first 5 years. And sometimes that can be difficult, but nonetheless, it gives you an idea as a council, based on the data that we collected, you know, what do we need to be programming, you know, annually, so that we can try to stay ahead of some of the pavement management needs. And this is something your city engineer can use and integrate into the work that they do with you, so that they can kind of take a look at the data we collected, some of the scenarios that we collected, and come back, work with the council year over year to try to come up with what they feel like might be an appropriate approach. As far as the next page, some of the overlay and reconstruction program, you know, in addition to just maintaining the system, there's probably the need to start to integrate a more regular overlay program. So every year you have a line item in your budget, kind of like you did this year, you know, up on 10th, is to say, you know, that was about, what, a quarter mile of work that you did. So that would be pretty similar to what we would call a conservative overlay program, where you're doing about 0.4 of a mile a year. Maybe you take that all the way up to a mile a year. But again, a community your size, thinking about that long range, that's why we do this kind of planning, is to say, okay, as a long range capital improvement kind of exercise for a community, you know, what do we think we want to start doing? And so what this does is give you a range of options. You can start thinking about, if we want to do a quarter mile a year, do we want to do a full mile a year? You know, maybe some years you do some, maybe some years you don't, just depending on the conditions. So overall, we feel like we took the existing conditions data, don't make any firm recommendations. It's really up to the council as you go forward to use these long-range plans to kind of help you set budgets over time. The next page gets into what we call intersection operations. We were asked to collect data at a number of intersections within the community. We collected data at 17 intersections. Those are shown on the map. The letters at each of those intersections relate to what is called a traffic level of service. So it's just like at school, an A is good and F is bad. So by and large today, everything in town is an A or a B. That's good news, that's not a surprise. And wherever you have stop control and you have Bs, all of that delay obviously is on your side streets. There is no delay for the through traffic. That gives us a sense of what are the traffic conditions out there today. If you turn your page, what you'll see is we then looked at some of the growth projections for the community and then tried to grow those to 2040. Because this was funded with DOT, they always ask that we do a future traffic forecast. So we took your 2019 data and we applied a growth rate to 2040 just so we could figure out, are there any areas that based on projected growth might start to incur some concerns. And you can see on that page, we circle some intersections where, you've gone from a B to a C. A few of those are on 115. You've got one on Old 77 and then a couple on North Garfield. Of course, all that stuff around the school, all that delay is gonna be side street delay, so I wouldn't get too concerned about that. It's very typical. And a C, level of service C is good. That's not a bad thing at all for a community this size. So we didn't see any problems with what we were projecting for future traffic.
What kind of population estimate are you using in that?
I don't believe it shows up in this report, but I think we have the community grown to about 4,000 over the life of the plan. I can verify that. I see Justin might be
Yeah, I've
surfing.
got the full thing with demographics.
We had you growing to 4,900
Oh,
by 2040. And that was a combination of looking, I believe, at a 30-year growth rate. So we kind of went back and looked at, what's the trend line. And that matches up pretty close to the PER report that DGR did a couple of years ago. This might not have been quite as aggressive as that one, but so almost 5,000. We felt a pretty healthy growth rate. So the other component that we developed on the next page from the 2040 intersection operations slide is a major streets plan. Really looking at, coming up with a functional class system, updating what you have in place, looking at roadways from minor arterials to major collectors, minor collectors, and probably most important for a community the size of Dell Rapids is where are those future minor collectors? Where are some of those roads that maybe are gravel township roads today, roads that you're gonna grow into? And that's what I would kind of point your attention to is some of the red-gray dotted lines there. Those are all future growth corridors for the community. As you continue to subdivide, as you continue to annex, being aware of, the need to improve those roads. Obviously, some things we heard through the planning process, continued pressure, on 245, particularly on the west side of Old 77. I mean, you're already, annexing and developing into that area. We heard some comments about maybe trying to do, some improvements on the north side of the school there, where 245 goes on the other side of Garfield. That's just a gravel section. Gulfview Drive, as it goes from, city into the county, might be another corridor to kind of keep your eye on. So that's just really kind of a major streets plan. It complements what you had started with your comprehensive plan update. Again, as you flip the page, you look at the functional class recommendations. I mean, that's kind of the underlying principle is, do you have the roadways classified to fit the standards that the feds put out there? And based on our evaluation, you do based on the proposed functional class designations that we've established for the community. The next page, when we start talking about system-wide needs and recommendations, I talked about a few of them as far as some of those growth corridors. A couple other things that the plan does leave out there is looking at, working with DOT for a potential speed study, particularly as you come into town on 115. With the reconstruction, with some of the additions down there, there's been a little bit of change in the truck route, of course, now you've got some turning movements onto and off of 115. So that's an area to look at that with DOT. It's a state highway, so you have to do a speed study. That wasn't in our scope of work, just to see if, maybe you could push some of those speeds around a little bit, just to recognize that you do have trucks turning off of and entering onto 115, as well as just your regular traffic. We didn't make any recommendations as far as your future level of service. We did indicate, those intersections where you would get to a C by 2040, keep an eye on those. Some of them are on the state system ultimately anyway, but you want to keep an eye on those. The other thing that we do suggest, particularly as we'll talk in a minute with the investments the city is going to be putting on some trail improvements on Old 77 is, take a look at that agreement that the city has with the county on that. I'm not gonna make a legal interpretation of that agreement, but I think given the investment the city's gonna put in what still appears to be county right-of-way, there might be need to just take a look at that agreement, make sure the city and Minnehaha County are on the same page before you go ahead and put some additional local, state, and probably federal funds into that right-of-way.
What level of traffic do you start looking at traffic lights in the community?
I would say you're a ways away, aside from 115 and 4th, you're a ways away.
I'm just thinking for pedestrian crossings, the traffic light would definitely stop the traffic.
Yeah, I think, Old 77 is one where I think, if you put the improvements in that are planned up there for some trails and some improved bed crossings, I think you're gonna go a long way. Some advanced warning signage, but you're a ways from meeting a warrant up there.
I think you're thinking about like the crossing lights or something.
Well,
And not the full.
yeah, or a red light would certainly stop traffic too, but,
Yeah.
that may not be necessary if you've got just like a yellow flashing
Yeah.
pedestrian.
There's some stuff that DGR can look at a little more closely as you move forward with getting some, state or federal dollars there for some of those intersection treatments. I mean, they do, there are things like hawk signals, which can be more confusing, I think, sometimes. You can do some ped flashers. There's quite a bit you can do there, because you do have a lot of kids in particular. We observed a lot of it kind of going back and forth and just trying to improve driver awareness. Speaking of PEDs, we were fortunate, we integrated some PED inventory that had been done in 2017. So if you look at the title page there, the sidewalk gaps, really tried to identify based on the data that was collected in 2017, where there's some missing links out there, and identified about 14 miles of sidewalk. Primary reason for doing this was just trying to, as the city does implement its CIP that it's developed, trying to get an estimate of, as you work your way through certain neighborhoods, if you're going curb to curb, if there's an opportunity to try to integrate some of those pedestrian facilities where they're accommodated. And then also taking a look at sidewalk replacement. This is something that DOTs and federal highways try to remind us of, and I think as communities, it's easy to forget about that, much like a roadway, a sidewalk doesn't last forever. And I think, where you do have sidewalks, some of those older sidewalks are, they've probably reached their useful life. So trying to make sure that we're not missing the accountability for that fact too, that those sidewalks do need some improvements. And I think, nothing's a deal buster for a smaller community, than some of those safety liability issues when it comes to sidewalks. If you flip the page, we talk about our total pedestrian costs. The other thing that we tried to throw in here too is, not forgetting about some of those ADA ramp conversions. I mean, that's another thing communities need to keep an eye on. ADA is a big deal. So we tried to make sure that we rolled up where you were at in terms of not only infilling missing links, replacement as you needed over time, our estimate for where you would be at for just trying to transition some of these neighborhoods into ADA. Again, that's a pretty big number, but much like your pavement stuff, this isn't something you're gonna do in 1 year. I mean, this is something the community, continually works on over the years ahead. That's why we do the long-range plan, is it gives us, what's the full buffet. You don't eat everything on the buffet, you just take a couple, a couple plates at a time, but, it does give you the full lineup of what a community needs to deal with.
I know one comment you made when talking about this and analyzing it is that some of the kind of critical pedestrian infrastructure near the schools, near downtown, we're
Very good shape.
We're in good shape there.
Yep.
But it's maybe expanding and concentrating on some of those areas, other areas that connect into those main kind of pedestrian corridors.
That's right, and it's not, that graphic is not in this, this summary, but in the full plan, you know, we look at those areas around the schools, you know, that's actually where your pedestrian system is strongest. You know, you've got the advanced warning systems, you've got the sidewalks, you've got the curb ramps. And that's something the plan does compliment the city on, is to say, you know, those areas you're doing really well on, it's just, you know, as you get away from those schools, just making sure that, you know, keeping your eye on the ball. And thanks for mentioning that, Justin. Future and existing trails, you know, the plan doesn't prioritize anything, but what we tried to do is take, you know, a lot of kind of bits and pieces, you know, put in one place, you know, a sense of where the community's at in terms of where you've identified future trail needs, you know, try to bullet those out for just kind of a planning level cost estimate. One of the reasons that you do this is I think you're finding out as you try to get dollars for, you know, facilities, for example, like along Old 77, is, you know, a state DOT or a federal funding agency or, you know, a foundation for that matter, what they like to see is, you know, was this, you know, idea you come up with identified in a plan? Did the public have a chance to comment on it? You know, so all of this gets kind of wrapped into the plan, so as, you know, Justin and, you know, works on future grant applications, having this plan in place to say, yep, you know, we developed this with the public, we had meetings, you know, it's in this plan, it's on page 79, it's in a map. So that's really why these kinds of things are important, particularly for smaller communities where funding is more difficult. If you flip the page, we did integrate verbatim some of the good work that DGR did. You know, they've been looking at in detail, getting even more engineering level detail, sort of a three-phased approach for improving the trail condition, pedestrian conditions along Old 77, really from 4th or 115 all the way up to 245 or 15th Street. So we integrated that in there. I believe the strategy is to start with the middle section, go to the north section, and then come back down and do the south section. And so we've integrated those in there. That'll be helpful. I know we did some field inventory and some pictures and stuff in the planning process that I know Justin and others have used. So that gets integrated right into your transportation plan. I think that was probably one of the issues that we heard a lot from the public is, you know, geez, you know, can we make sure we get something in the plan on upgrading Old 77, and I think we certainly got that. I mentioned earlier the walkability assessment that Wellmark did back in 2017, and you know, it left a number of recommendations, and I feel like this plan allowed the city to actually take the next step with some of those as far as, you know, helping to prioritize, you know, some of those infill areas for sidewalks, you know, starting to set, you know, or at least keep that discussion going as far as a citywide sidewalk maintenance program, understanding, okay, what would the cost be, how might we start to incrementally do this, you know, how might it fit with the CIP work that's ongoing, the trail along Old 77, and those kinds of things. So I felt like that was a good benchmark to you know, hopefully have put a few of those bullets and move forward on those. So that's, you know, kind of the nickel tour. There's obviously a lot in there. And I know we've had 2 rounds of public involvement. You know, we had a round in the, I think it was late summer. You know, we did some survey work. We had another round, I think, right between Christmas or between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Seems like forever ago now, but, so we did, you know, have some decent public involvement, and we feel like we did our best to try to make sure that the community and some stakeholders were involved in this process, and I think they were.
I know that you've been working on updating a comprehensive plan, and
Yep.
how will this study, will we, some of this end up being incorporated in that, or how does that work?
Absolutely. I mean, like the classification of streets that was done in here, that will get incorporated. Some of the growth area mapping, some of the goals that were set, some of those kind of things will definitely make it into the comp plan. I actually have a meeting with Kristen from CCOG on Thursday to talk about what we're going to integrate into the comp plan, so we can get the comp plan adopted in a relatively short period of time, since that's kind of been sitting for the last year.
Wade, you've done some, some of these transportation studies before in your long career. But can you, when you look at Dell Rapids and where we're at, the things we're doing, and how do we stack up with, similar sized communities, or are there some things that we could be doing maybe that we're not? Are there some things we're doing that we should do better?
Oh, I compare you to, I've worked with probably 3 or 4 similar sized communities around the Fargo, Moorhead area, you're 20, 25 miles away. You're right there, if not, well beyond some of those communities in terms of some of your infrastructure, in terms of your pavement management program. You've got the facilities downtown, you've got facilities around the schools. Yeah, I certainly, and like I said, when we were talking before the meeting, sometimes these are a lot more complicated, they're a lot more difficult. I think you're a really good community. You've got a lot of great things. You've got growth, which means you have some tax revenue, you've got a pretty good system out there. I'm not just saying that because you paid me for that.
The state, well, yeah, we only paid 20%.
That's right.
Yeah, I'd highly encourage the council, if you need me, I didn't print out, there's a copy right there, the full plan. I know I printed one out for Gary, but I gave it to Mike, so I'll get you one printed out, Gary. It'd be good to go through this page by page, because he really did, as a brief overview, there's a lot more maps, there's a lot more graphs, there's a lot more explanation about how they calculated everything and looked into everything, so it'd be good to have copies of that.
The numbers you show in here to do this project, is that based on this year's?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have to take in consideration the costs will go up.
There's some year of expenditure, right? If you're looking at a project in 10 years, it's gonna be,
That's what I figured, but I'm just curious.
yeah, they're real today dollars.
Any thought to east, west, I'm thinking of 7th Street, which is the longest street in the city, to relieve some of the pressure off of 4th and 10th?
One of the things that we, looked at when we collected the data is, overall with 10th going through and with 15th being constructed, you've seen those volumes go up and traffic on the rest of the system has gone down, because now you have those through routes. It seems like right now you've got a good distributed system for a community your size. I didn't encounter anything where I felt like there's a missing link. Everything seemed, and the day, we were up here the day that you were overlaying 10th, and so that was interesting to see that. We were trying to collect data that day, and so we had to wait a day, and then we were doing some pavement conditions, so, that really followed stuff up, which led me to believe that, what you got going on now must work pretty well.
No, if you look in the detailed version of all that traffic, yeah, and you see all those traffic counts, yeah, 10th Street gets a lot of use,
I know, but I just
Yeah,
wondered,
yeah.
having another
Yeah.
east-west corridor, it would relieve, because 10th is gonna keep getting busier
Yeah.
as we grow.
Have to make it a 4-lane.
I drive transit bus, I also drive school bus, and having the school children, riding on school bus really helps the pedestrian traffic in this town. I can say that from experience, because I've driven all the routes. I was substitute driver last year, and there's a lot of students that are using the bus to go home instead of walking streets or riding their bicycles or whatever. And that is a very good safety plus. It's a lot safer for the children to be dropped at 25 locations in town.
Yeah, not every school district offers that either.
Pardon me?
Not every school district
Correct.
offers that in communities our size, so we're fortunate for that.
Another question, Since 10th Street is so busy, I'm currently employed with the ambulance service. Would it be feasible for, down the road of putting warnings, some type of warning system or flashing light like we do in Sioux Falls with the fire stations?
At the hospital, you're
Yeah.
thinking about,
Yeah, the garage
Right.
at the ER there.
You know, you might consider it, I mean, we'd have to look at it in
Well, yeah.
specific, I mean, you have to remember that, you know, what is a lot of traffic to you is not very much traffic, you know, in Sioux Falls, I mean, your volumes are pretty low. I mean, you take a 2-lane road without a center left, I mean, you've gotta almost quadruple those numbers, you know, before you'd need to think about
Okay.
capacity, I mean, you've got a lot of roadway capacity, for a community your size,
Okay.
you're in good shape.
Justin, I was thinking, with this report and stuff, you've got the roads that are in worst condition in town, or some of those roads, what was it, State and 7 or 6 or something. Are those areas that are gonna be needing new water and sewer coming up in the future?
Well, that was one of the reasons that we wanted to have this study done, is so we can, you know, we
Dovetail them together?
we can dovetail, we can work with what we know the aging system is and help to prioritize what streets should be on the chopping block in the future. To
Yeah,
help
because
us inform decisions on how to, on what streets to
I've
choose.
seen places totally redo a street, and then all of a sudden, 2 years later, they rip it all up, and then they go.
That would all be coordinated together.
Yeah, I think it's always been our thinking is, if you're gonna tear the street up and do the utilities, you're looking at doing a total job, and, but I think now I think we have a really good understanding of the conditions of our underground utilities, water, sewer, and all that. Now we've added this other component, we know, we have more information about the condition of our streets, so when we look at making these decisions, that's gonna factor in, I suspect, to some degree, but.
Do you ever look at like agricultural, getting from east to the west? And what streets for equipment and
We did analyze the truck route.
Yeah, I mean, we did look at, you know, what you had for a truck route, we felt like that was enough, you know, to get, whether it was, you know, tractor trailers or ag equipment, you know, through town. I mean, we didn't identify any, you know, sore spots, where we felt like, hey, we, you know, either collected some data or felt like we had things that were happening where you had different types of equipment that was having a struggle.
I think a better question would be, truck route, existing truck route that we have, is it way different than any other communities our size, that it's so far out of the way to go on our truck route?
We felt like it was appropriate.
Okay.
We felt like, you know, one of the things we didn't study, but, you know, we talked about, you know, some kind of a bypass, but then when you start looking at, you know, the cost for that and the fact that you've got rivers and those kinds of things. Yeah, we felt like what you had was appropriate, you know, as the city continues to put dollars, like in Third Street, for example, that corridor gets improved. Yeah, I think you are where you need to be in terms of that truck route. The work that went into that, I think, paid off, in our opinion.
Any other questions of Wade? This process, before the meeting, started last March.
Plus or minus, yeah.
Yeah, and the meetings that have taken place, so, the other people who've been involved, I think importantly, from Justin's point of view, has been the visiting with the stakeholders, the elevator, and LG, et cetera, and getting their input so they're aware of what we were doing, and we heard what their thoughts were. So it's been a good process, so.
Yeah, and then the few public meetings we held, they didn't necessarily have great turnout, but there also was the map,
Yeah.
social pinpoint map that was done.
They've
And we
got
got a lot of good feedback and comments and conversations that happened along those lines. So, yeah, I guess, just a comment, appreciative of the work that KLJ has done. It's nice to have this in written form, just a set of outside eyes looking in and viewing our community a little bit differently from a professional perspective. And I think it's gonna be a great planning tool for us, and appreciative to the DOT for helping to fund it as well. I guess one of the biggest reasons, and Wade alluded to that, is that we keep going to the state and asking for funding for 10th Street, for 15th Street, for Quartzsite Street, and they're funding us with some pretty high value, high dollar grants. That they were kind of turning around, starting to say, okay, you continue to come to us asking for funding, what's your plan? So now that we have a plan in place that shows where future corridors are gonna go, where future bike paths are gonna go, you know, we have proof of that plan and worked with the DOT to help design that plan, so.
Any other questions? Well, Wade, thank you so much, and we appreciate the work you've done, and we wish you a safe journey home tonight.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, under old business, next is the change order number 1 on the dam site recreation trail project.
Attached is change order number 1. This is for Dirt Specialties in the Dam Site Recreational Trail Project. As the council was updated towards the end of the fall into winter in 2019, that the project scheduled to be completed by November of 19 was not going to be completed due to floods and weather, and wet weather, etc. So we negotiated a new schedule with Dirt Specialties. That's reflected here in this change order. So we're moving the substantial completion date to July 31st and the final completion date to August 15th. So that would be approval of this change order would be approving those completion dates.
Any comments, Riley?
Question, what happens if we end up with the same mess we had last year? Will that
I
affect
mean, if we have
I guess
more
what-
flooding and,
Yeah, I mean, might have to open this up again, but,
okay,
for the second change order, but this is just gonna reflect that, assuming that he's going to be able to get the job done in that period of time.
okay.
The west end, most of that's been completed?
The west end hasn't. Down by the dam, that's the area that could be flooded, pretty bad this spring, but I guess from the pedestrian bridge, which you can see from the highway we drive by, from there to the west, almost over to that mill, avenue that goes down to the dam. That section between there has been completed.
And then they,
The trail's done, but they gotta do some grading and
and
seeding.
then coming to the east from the bridge.
Yeah, that'll get tied in on the east side, and then they gotta do the very west end by the dam.
Not a huge amount.
Yeah.
But he doesn't move from
And if you were down there, you know, well, when the flood, that was just one big mess down there, it really was, so.
I make a motion to approve change order number 1.
Moved by Gary to approve change order number 1 for the dam site recreation trail project. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bob. Any other questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Next is the Highway 115 project, change order 1 and pay request 6, final payment.
This will require 2 motions of the council. First that we'll consider is change order number 1 for the Highway 115 project. We've really been pushing to get this project closed because this project is attached to the 10th Street project, which we finished in 2018. But just because of the schedule of the 115 project getting flip-flopped around, now this is getting expanded out, so we're still paying interest on this loan that we haven't closed yet. So we would really like to get this closed. We were pushing TNR to finalize everything this fall. There was a few things that aren't finalized too. Some of the property owners along the routes standards. They did come out towards the later end of the fall and did do some work, but there is definitely some final punch list items that we want them to complete. And TNR has promised us that they will complete these within the warranty period clause of the contract. Tonight what this does is it's a change order that adjusts the final kind of quantities to get us to the final contract price. It actually reduces the contract price by about $4,657 from $768,000 to $763,000. So that's change order number one, and then pay request number 6 is to approve final payment to TNR in the amount of $86,083.09.
Move to approve the change order.
Moved by Mark to approve the change order to the Highway 115 project. Is there a second? Bill, I think Bill beat you. Bill seconds that motion. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion's carried. Now we need a motion to approve pay request number 6.
So moved.
Moved by Gary to approve that pay request 6. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bob. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Okay, moving into new business, the city attorney's retainer. We're not talking about teeth, are we?
No, the second meeting of January is when we've done this kind of historically. Dean provided a monthly kind of track of the previous year, and as well as a comparison of past years and what the city has expended and the hours that have been worked by the Dell Rapids law firm. Just to point out, in 2019, the fee was lowered from $1,800 to $1,600, and Dean has presented the city with a maintaining that $1,600 fee for the projected 2020 year, the monthly retainer fee. Appreciative of the solid legal advice that Dean provides to the city on that as needed basis. Keeps us out of legal strife. So with that, recommend approval. And if Dean wants to say anything to any comments.
It helps having good staff over here, so you can see 20 years ago I was putting a lot more hours than I am now, so.
Make a motion to approve.
Moved by Gary to approve the retainage fee for city attorney.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mike. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Next is the public works equipment, purchase of a new jetter machine.
Attached is the quote for a new jetter Vector machine. This is a budgeted item that was in the 2019 budget. Clarence didn't get around to getting these final quotes from Interstate Products until this January. The current jetter is a 2002 with 682 hours. Handles
250, 25.
25 probably, I think, is the difference there. Yeah, that doesn't look right.
Yes, 25.
So the new one is a higher horse, higher PSI, a little bit bigger tanks, and just to do the work that these guys do with that machine to jet out lines, have a little bit more ability that we can flush out some of our sewer lines a little bit more effectively without having to have a contractor come up and do that for us. Also helps with cleaning lift stations and all of those kind of things that they do for the maintenance mostly on this wastewater systems, sewer system. They'll also be using storm sewers on occasion too to clean out storm sewer manholes and lines. The final price on this machine is $111,080. The quote is is through Sourcewell, which is a consortium that the state bid law allows to buy direct through. These are nationwide bids, and then this interstate would honor that through the Sourcewell consortium. Right now, I did not put on the agenda to have the current jetter machine surplus. Sanitation has offered $15,000 for a trade-in for the existing, but we think if we put it out, we can get more than that, so we'll do closed bids on that, but would wait until we declare that surplus until a new jetter is, if the council approves that we receive that new one, then we'll go through the bid process on the old one.
Have you, or has anybody looked at used ones to see what they are bringing?
The one that age, I think is around that 20,000 is what we
So we
anticipate.
should be able to get that little extra out of it.
We think so. If we don't, then he said he would honor that if you turn around and sell it to him for that, if we don't get it sold.
But where do you advertise that? Because that's kind of a specialty piece of equipment.
On the municipal league website, maybe there's another city that would, a smaller city that needs a piece of equipment like that could pick it up.
You put it like the city.
The city magazine, the cities have the municipal league magazine, we could advertise it in, it's one area.
Is like a city like the size of Baltic, do they have one?
No, they don't.
In the past, have they like hired us to do theirs, or?
I think they probably hire, like that outfit out of Watertown or something to come down and do theirs. They've never hired us directly.
Like Baltic or Colton, all three of them could possibly buy it together.
Maybe, yeah.
Colt has one.
Colton has one?
I was talking with Ryan today.
Do they need a certain rating to operate that machine? Like we've got,
Like a license or something?
yeah, or, our
I
guys
don't
that
think so.
run the treatment plant, they've got different levels of,
Not to run
Yeah,
this machine.
yeah.
This is just kind of a
Big holes.
big hose, yeah.
yeah, but you're dealing with potential sewer gas and,
That's true.
yeah.
They do their training on confined spaces and.
You'd use it for crowd control if the dance gets out of hand, right?
There you go.
Sprays the wrong way though.
So we need to make a.
Need a motion
Motion
to.
Approve it.
You
I approve it.
Yeah, okay, Gary moves to approve, purchase of a new, vacuum trailer jetter, sanitation products. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bob. Are there any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion is carried. Next is consider quotes for council chambers camera and audio system. That should make you happy, Gary.
I wanna know about the camera.
Yeah, the city is budgeted this year, to install the camera system. Matt Larson has been happily continuing to bring his device, to City Hall with expectation that we'll transition over ourselves. We actually, there's a big piece of the equipment is installed in this closet right now, through Granicus that we're gonna be, sending the live streaming over to, but we just need to physically install the cameras and the microphones, and then the mixer and everything to get the system up and running. There is an attached quote in the packet, from Direct Automation, for $2,534 for the equipment and another $1,525 in installation fees, for a total of $879.34. I have sought some other quotes and haven't been able to get anyone. I just received an email today from someone that I've been recommended that could potentially look at doing this, and haven't been able to find another source of an IT company that is willing to come in. I have verified they've got it broken out into equipment, and then the labor and the equipment, I've checked online and all of those costs are in order, there's nothing out of line there. I just thought it was kinda high, of a quote. We only budgeted 3,000, so this will be over that $3,000 budget, so we'll just have to cut somewhere else, in our expenditures within this kind of general area of the budget. This will be, you know, it's not super high-end equipment, it's not super low-end equipment, it'll get the job done. We wanna get going on this because, as staff, because the Granicus package we have for our agenda system, we are already paying for this service, so we'd like to get it up and running, so we're actually using the service that we're paying for as well. So,
Now,
with that,
remind us, with the video done and, okay, the video will end up being indexed, right?
yes, connected to our agenda system, so that people can go into on the website and click that they want to watch us talk about this tomorrow. They could click on the consider quote for council chambers, camera and audio system. And it would automatically fast forward them to that point in the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so it will be indexed.
So the television that you put in the second part of this,
Yeah, that's not part of this quote. We're gonna purchase that on our own and mount that behind the mayor.
okay, it's gonna get mounted on,
Yes,
That's-
not on wheels or
Yeah.
anything,
no, we're gonna mount that on the wall.
and it's gonna be a TV, it's not gonna be a projector,
It's not gonna be a projector, it'll be TV.
okay?
Yeah.
How big?
As big as we can get for the whatever affordable price we can find it for.
Have you priced both projectors?
I have not done that yet, no. We kinda need it to be a television, cause we're planning on using it as like a smart TV. That kinda mirrors my computer screen, is the plan.
So you can bring up part of town on the screen.
Yeah, so I could click on the map and zoom in on a property or whatever while I'm sitting here, and then the rest of everyone can see
Most
it.
of the Bluetooth too. The projector, I'm
Projectors.
just saying to not kick the projector out of the
Right.
door without checking
Right,
price.
is
position.
maybe what would, maybe the lighting in the room, like if it's a day or something too, like in the sun's blaring in here, you won't be able to see a projected screen as much as a TV too, I guess is something we thought about.
If you got a laser pointer and you shine at the TV, it doesn't work.
Right?
You'll have
Steering
the mouse
committee.
thing.
Steering committee, doesn't
Yeah,
I can't use the laser pointer
Can't use
because
the
the
laser
TV
pointer.
absorbs it, so
Right.
you have to have a screen to shoot a laser on.
right.
I get you a long stick.
It's no hard thing.
Chad's still looking at that even.
Yeah, he's been helping us
Yeah.
kinda look at this and talk through some of it too.
There's pros and cons to both, and one thing, another thing is it doesn't, you don't have to wait, you don't have the space, I mean, you can zip up the screen,
Right, and get rid of it.
get rid of it, and that thing's up there where it's not in the way.
Right.
No, just things to,
Think about that.
just to look at, not kick it out the door completely.
Yep, understand.
So the theory behind the budget, what we budgeted, was that with the TV and the installation of all this equipment and everything, and so the TV is gonna be?
Yeah, I just undershot, I think, Mark. I've been trying to find a way to get all of this done at relative low cost, and then, you know, when it comes down to it, it was more than I expected.
Well, I too looked up kind of some of the prices of their equipment, and I mean, they're pretty fair on their pricing
Yeah,
of the
they're fair,
equipment,
yeah.
the labor just
I know, that's,
kills me.
and I talked with them, and what's happened is in the past, when they rewired City Hall, they really undershot that. And so he just wanted to make sure he was padding it enough so we weren't surprised later, so he built in hours into that, it's, you know, so much per hour. And so if he gets done quicker than that, we're not just automatically paying $1,500. It'll be on an hourly basis.
These old buildings are very hard to wire.
He's pulled the wire, the wires are up here, they're ready to be plugged in. He just said that, so they also did, Crooks, City Hall wired it, and that it took them a while to figure out how to like mix the sound, cause there's gonna be different audio or different microphones to get that sound mixed right, and it took some hours to do that. They've got more experience now since they did do that, that hopefully it's gonna cut that down as well. So, I did approach them and seeing if we can get that lowered, hopefully.
Is this all new equipment, full warranty?
Yes,
As we know, so.
yes.
Need to clarify that.
We don't really need the microphones, we can cut that part out.
Well,
See how good they are in the
Teach
freezer?
every,
you want your own cut out?
Yeah, you won't even hear me talk.
teach everybody to lip read. Well, we've been, yeah, this has been like, you know, going on 2 years,
in the
we've
making,
been,
yeah.
to get this done and get us moving, you know, keeping us current with the world, and I'm sure Matt will probably buy us all a drink once this is done. And we, you know, we do greatly appreciate the fact that he's been willing to continue to support the webcam activity with this meeting twice a month, and we appreciate that for sure. So, anyway, entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Moved by Bill to approve the bid submitted by Direct Automation. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bob. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. City planning and zoning.
We haven't had a planning and zoning commission meeting for around 6 months. We do have one coming up, and so, Tom, the last, I would say, or the mayor, the last 5 months, we had indication from Robert Lamberty, that he would like to be replaced on the planning commission. Robert's health hasn't been, the best the last year or so, and he missed some meetings and had some concerns associated with that. So I know, the mayor spoke to, 2 or 3, community members that didn't either have the time or had family conflicts or other professional conflicts. But recently visited with Virgil Klein, who lives at 812 North Vermont, and Mr. Klein has agreed to serve in that capacity as Bob's replacement. I guess from that standpoint, the council will need to approve the resignation of Bob Lamberty to the planning commission and make a motion to approve the appointment of Virgil Klein to replace Bob Lamberty. I'll just say, Bob's been on planning commission since I came into Del Rapids 9 years ago. He's been a pleasure to work with. He's obviously has a huge place in his heart for the community. Served on the fire department for, I think, well over 25, 30 years, on the city council, with Tom in the 80s, on the planning commission for, I don't even know the years yet. I need to research how many years he sat on all these boards. So what he's done for the community is obviously incredibly appreciated.
And we were talking earlier today that, you know, in 86 or 85 and 86, when we were dealing with that decision to switch over to Minnehaha Community Water, and Bob was instrumental. He was part of that team to make that happen. So, and as I've said before, one of the biggest and best decisions this community has ever made in terms of where we are today. So, you know, 30 plus years later. So, I'd entertain a motion to accept the resignation of Bob Lamberty.
So
Moved by Gary. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mark. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. I did visit with Virgil. I think most of you know Virgil, and he does have some construction experience in his life, et cetera. And what he would bring to planning and zoning is somebody with some common sense, and I think understanding dealing with these issues that do come up to planning and zoning, and I think he'll be a good addition. And entertain a motion to appoint Mr. Klein.
Already on that board.
5. It's Roger Deerduff's chairman and Tom Ludens, Tom Swaybach, Steve Hoff, and now it'll be Virgil. So entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Moved by Bill to approve the appointment of Virgil Klein to the planning and zoning board. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mike. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. City Administrator, talk to us about the ICMA Leadership Program.
I approached Tom, about this a few weeks back. So the Kettering Foundation program I've been associated with the last year and a half here. That's in coordination with ICMA, the International City Managers Association. I was approached by one of the organizers of this program that I'm requesting support for tonight, the ICMA Leadership Program. I was approached to apply for that program, and also was told that there would be a scholarship available to me if I sought to apply. So the Leadership ICMA program, it's a very selective program. It's held in Charleston this coming May, and it's a 2-year commitment program, so there would be some other travel associated in 2021 as well. There's a really kind of thorough description in the attachment in the packet of the program and what's covered in the curriculum. Part of the application is I need to have my employer's support, and so tonight I'm seeking the council to approve Tom to support, to sign a letter of support for me to apply to the program. Really, this gets down to support of both financially and time that may be away from the office in 2020 and 2021. I've got kind of the budgets laid out here. I guess the bottom line of the budgets is that in 2020 it would be under what my travel budget generally is, and in 2021 I would be able to make it work at the travel budget that we allot annually to me for professional development training and everything of that nature. The way I'd make it work within the budget is by receiving scholarships, and my commitment to the council would be that if I don't receive the scholarships, that I won't participate in the program. So we'll be seeking a scholarship through ICMA, as well as through the South Dakota City Managers offer scholarships for training throughout the course of the years. I guess I view this as an opportunity to kind of continue developing myself personally, professionally, and also an opportunity to continue learning and gain more experience, and gain experience without moving too and staying in Del Rapids. And so I really
That's a.
Well,
We're
no,
gonna
that's
guarantee
why-
you're gonna stay another.
no, I mean that's what I view it as though.
Yeah.
I've been here 9 plus years now, and it's an opportunity to kind of continue to grow and not have to go to a bigger town or something of that nature, because I enjoy being here, enjoy raising my family here. So with that,
I think, we visited about it at length, and I think, when it comes to the subject of training of their staff and whatever, it should be a good investment, and I think this is a good investment on part. I think, when we have talked about Justin's role here in the city, but also his role as he interacts with other entities, other cities, the state, et cetera. I think it puts us, I believe, in a much better position. And I think, there are things that he has learned from his experiences with ICMA that have helped us, and I'm really supportive of making sure that, people get the training that's there. I think, it's, ICMA people, obviously they approached you, so which tells you something right there, that they understand, they can see that, the quality of the work that he does and his interest in the profession, so anyway. So we did visit about this at quite at length, and I would be totally supportive of it, so.
How many are in that?
I think it's like 12 to 15 or something from the whole, across the whole country, so it's pretty exclusive. I don't know for sure, if I'll get in, but just, I got approached, I dragged my feet about it, and then said, gosh, this is an opportunity, I got approached, I probably should pursue this, rather than let an opportunity pass.
So we need a motion to approve?
Well, I think
To sign the letter of support.
Just as all we.
Yeah.
moved by Gary to issue a letter of support for the city administrator to participate in the ICMA program. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bob. Any other questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Now it's time to pay the bills.
So moved.
Bob moves that we pay the bills. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mark. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Administrator, Finance Officer report.
We held our meeting with the flood affected property owners on January 9th. I think nearly every property owner expected to be in attendance was here. At the end of this, it looks like we're gonna have 10 properties that will apply for the FEMA buyout program. There was some in attendance that we're still just kind of gaining information. We do have a relatively tight timeline that needs to be fulfilled. These applications are due by March 13th, but we really want to have everything gathered information-wise before March 2nd. We've already had multiple property owners turn in the necessary signed paperwork to begin the process of the application. Commitment forms, disclosure forms, that kind of a thing. All the property owners were instructed to get an appraisal done. So several of them are working on those, and several of them have actually already got those appraisals done and have sent them over to CCOG, and others are still working on that. The other big piece to the application is the cost for demolition. And so, the way it's been approached is that every property owner is supposed to seek a quote for demolition costs. Once applications are compiled, we'll be sending those out to the state. That March 13th deadline, the state's gonna review. They said that they should have indication back to the property owners by middle of April, so they'll know whether or not they're gonna receive the funding. But the funding actually won't be available till mid-July, so they'll close and then be responsible for the demolition. And so the demolition has to happen within 90 days of the closing. So mid-July till August, September, October, early November will be the deadline to get those homes torn down.
So those homes have to be demolished, or can they be moved?
They can be moved. That would be a different kind of section on the application. And we did have some inquiries into that. I don't think anybody's gonna end up pursuing that right now. FEMA will cover 85% of the moving, the physical moving. They'll pay for 85%. If you had a full basement, they'll put a full basement in. They won't build walls or anything and, finish the basement for you. They'll pay to build the basement. They will, there's a bunch of the disconnection and connection to utilities and stuff. They'll cover some of that, but they won't install like a new hot water heater and furnace and that kind of a thing. You gotta do that on your own. They also won't pay for the new lot where you're moving the house either. So I think there was some people that kind of weighed that and looked at it and saw that those costs were too high for for them to do that.
So when they demo it, they can't bring it to our dump, they gotta go somewhere else, correct?
That is correct.
And if Sioux Falls,
Most likely Sioux Falls. I have reached out to the city of Sioux Falls and requested that they consider, lessening the tipping fee associated with these homes. So I've reached out and hopefully that will create some cost savings.
Is there anyone that's considering raising their home down there, Justin? I thought there was, at one point in time, there was talk of.
There was talk of some of those, and I think the logistics and the costs associated are higher than people are willing to.
So of these 10 properties, are there gonna be any more remaining that have along the riverfront?
Yes,
How many?
one for sure. Did not reach the 50% threshold.
And they're right along the river?
Yep.
Or have property adjoining the river?
Yep.
The program, the monies, the funding flows through the city, so do you have to do something, account-wise, set up a new account to track all this, or how does that work?
I have to figure, yes, we would keep everything separate, and we were kind of discussing too, with Justin, there's gotta be some, and I would, again, I remember hearing this from one of the, I don't know if it was state or somebody, but there has to be some, way of making sure that everything's taken care of, like, they, you know,
The
we can't
demolition's
just,
completed
yes,
properly
everything's
and-
complete, take it down to the grass, like, it's gotta be, before all the funds are released. But there will definitely be logistics that I need to, I need to follow up on some things, when this all takes place, to make sure we're doing it properly.
Is CCOG?
CCOG will help with all of that transaction stuff. They'll be, just like they do with all of our grants that we distribute today, with the Southeast Project and everything, they're gonna help track all of that.
So April, they'll find out if they qualify and what they're gonna get.
Yep.
July, they will receive their money.
The monies, nothing can happen until the monies are free, and it's anticipated that mid-July, those funds will become available.
Okay, so those funds come available,
Mhm.
the homeowners will get their check.
Not necessarily, it
I
comes
think
through us.
Yeah,
They've gotta do the work.
They have to do the work first.
right.
They've gotta get the house tore down first before they receive the money.
yes.
So there's not a scenario where they collect the money
collect the
and,
money and run. No,
and
no,
run
that's
and leave
protected.
the city with a house standing there that,
No, that's protected.
Yeah.
okay.
Now, we're trying to figure out how to manage the demolition side of things. We've got some local folks that are interested. There's been some requests to the city, and I haven't brought those to the council, just trying to navigate some of this. Those decisions don't have to be made now, we can make those a little further down the line, when we know which of these homes is gonna get approved, et cetera. We'll have some time to have those discussions. There's been really variable costs, quotes that have been coming through from 10,000 to 40,000. So, they're trying to navigate that a little bit. And it seems like this group of homeowners is really working together well and communicating together well right now. They've gone in on one single appraiser that's doing everything, and that appraiser's lowered their costs. So maybe we can work with the property owners to kind of bundle and all decide to go with one contractor to do the demo, and they can get a package deal or something too. So we're just kind of need to navigate that yet.
Okay, then the city takes over the property?
In this case,
or-
yes. the
Or they still own it?
city- No, the city
The city
takes
will
over
own
the
it.
property.
Okay, so,
They're purchased, and they lose all possession of the property.
There's actually a closing,
That's
just
the
like-
only way to do the FEMA buyout program.
okay, so then when do we take possession and have to start maintaining it and?
It's
Once everything's complete.
gotta be
I mean,
reclaimed.
do they seed it and fill
Yeah, that's all part of
That's
the
all part of
demolition,
that.
the
That's
reclamation.
part of the demolition.
They've gotta take it back to,
We don't have to.
We don't, that's not our responsibility, you know, that is theirs. So that's why it would be nice though to have maybe one contractor that was doing these all, that we could watch to make sure everything's getting done properly. Cause we're seeing digging basements all the way out and everything's getting done.
And all that's gonna be.
Capped properly and everything.
Yeah.
of that nature. Yeah.
So this property owner that did not hit the 50% threshold, what's their thoughts? Did they wanna stay? Or
They wanna stay.
do they have feelings of maybe moving out?
They wanna
But
stay,
they just couldn't, it just didn't work for them.
they wanna stay.
They wanna stay.
Yeah. Grew up in the home.
first name, right?
Mike was you were at the meeting, right? And
I think Bob was there.
Bob, and was Jed here too?
You might know, I can't remember.
I think it was just Mike.
Just you two, anyway, I think having the assistance of CCOG is absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. Kristen could answer every bloody question that people had, and they know their stuff, and so, that really, really helps a lot, and I think the people are at that point where, well, things are moving along, and it's kinda surprised me that so many people were right that night wanted to sign the paperwork.
They wanted to,
And he had his notary seal here, he went to work, so that's good, so people are interested in, and, I know that Justin will continue to, keep the, flow of information to these people. So there were dates, they got a packet, we each got a packet, outlining things they had to do, the dates that Kristen needs to have this material sent to her, et cetera, and whatever, so I think, so it went very well, and, I want, appreciate the work that Justin's, done on this, it wasn't in his work plan for the year, that's for sure, so anyway. So next thing you know, it'll be, March, and we'll, see what happens, so.
And Justin, they're all applying individually, correct? Not
They-
as a group?
No, yeah, they're all individually with the city, supporting,
Yes,
kind of the co-signer of the
yep, so that
application.
out of these 10, maybe it's only 7 that could be approved.
Yeah, right, like the gentleman that was here from the state said, this is not guaranteed.
Correct.
So, and they're all aware of that, they all have an awareness, so.
And it was again, it
You
was
know,
stated at the meeting more than once that this is a voluntary.
Yeah, they all have an awareness of the, they're happy cause it's went from 75 to 85%, so they know that now, they have an awareness, and they have an awareness of their responsibilities associated with the 85% of the demolition and the costs and everything. The way that should work for them, it's important to point out that, somebody's gonna come and tear it down. Generally, that contractor's gonna hand you a bill and say, you got 30 days to pay me. And then we should be able to send that bill to the state, get the reimbursement, and get that to them, so that they're able to pay that contractor. And they don't have to fork out, find $20,000 out of pocket to pay him and then wait for that 85% to come in.
So there's a $20,000 bill to tear this house down. We're
Yep.
gonna get 85% of that, which would be, $17,000. There's gonna be $3,000 left to pay on that.
Yeah.
And the person don't have it. So now the contractor has no choice but to file a lien against that property. Who pays the lien when we're
Aren't they
acquiring
supposed,
the
they're
property?
supposed to pay for it upfront? They're, they can't, a contractor won't, send the bill to the state.
No, the way we talked about it that night was that's how it would look. What I just said how it would unfold is how it will unfold. And they are responsible for that part.
I think that there'll be a regular closing on the property after everything's done, so there'll be title insurance and there'll be closing costs, so I envision that lien will just get deducted from the seller's proceeds, so, cause we have to get clear title. And if there's a mortgage, they pay off the mortgage, whatever's left, they'll get.
So homeowner's not gonna get anything until it's totally complete, level, seeded. Is it supposed to be seeded or the same?
Yep, seeded, it's, reclaimed, and we can inspect that, work with Barry to figure out
So
whatever.
once
kind
it's
of
signed off, all
grass
these
and-
I's and all these T's have been dotted, then we're gonna do the closing, there's title insurance, so the homeowner will ultimately be responsible for it.
Yep.
So.
Okay. I think over the years FEMA has learned a lot about how.
Well, I'm just thinking of all the
Yeah.
scenarios.
Yeah, they learned how not to get stuck.
Yeah, like Dean said, it would probably,
Yeah,
problem with that is that the mortgage is probably gonna get any proceeds before, if there was a mortgage left to pay and
Yeah.
they don't cover it, they're probably gonna get those proceeds before the contractor would, but.
true. They'd have priority.
I don't think we're
Yeah.
facing, I think that there's the one property that has the mortgage scenario, and they're working for some outside financing to cover that. But the rest of them, I don't think that there's mortgages left on. Some of them received some insurance payouts and were able to pay their mortgage off already. So I don't think we're gonna run into any scenarios like that, from my personal conversations with individuals.
I think it was, at the meeting, it was made very clear about, you know, they are the people responsible and the things that they have to do. And, you know, we're just facilitating, we're not, yeah. I think that was made very clear to them, and I think they understand that, and, you know, that's the decision that each property owner has to make, so.
And I think you brought up a point, unfortunately, if you get one bad apple going through the process years back, then they're like, well, we gotta change that, so now you come up and everybody's like, why is it such a big damn application that I gotta file 300 pages of this stuff? That's the reason why.
No, it's, I mean, it's set up to, it protects everybody, I guess. You know, and
Assurances.
make sure, and to make sure that it happens and gets done right, so.
Any other questions on FEMA stuff? As, along the same lines as the FEMA stuff, we did meet with the FEMA, office that's stationed in Sioux Falls to start filing the paperwork associated with the fall flood for the city's expenses to get reimbursement. So Claire and myself and Clarence are gathering that information and getting all of that submitted.
Do you remember on the paperwork, is there a place where they have to indicate loan balances? Like if they show appraised value, and then will they list if there's a mortgage or?
Yes, I think that's part of their,
Yeah.
and then like if they received any insurance payouts and everything of that nature too,
Yeah.
that is part of the application.
What I'm thinking we
Top of
could,
the form there's about 8 different places where you gotta put numbers in, you know, yeah.
I'm thinking we could even order the title insurance early in the process, just to see, before they start knocking walls down, just to know
Right.
whether it's feasible, so.
One other thing I didn't mention is that, this contractors probably already know in this room, but they're gonna have to do mitigation of any hazardous materials. So they're gonna have to test for asbestos. So if there is asbestos, like, there was maybe indication one of the houses has asbestos siding on it, that's gonna have to be mitigated. Those costs are covered 85%, but the property owner is still gonna be responsible for those as well.
Thermostats?
Thermostats, what do you mean for asbestos?
Mercury.
Thermometers.
Yeah, I mean,
With all
it's just the
this
city of Sioux
yeah.
Falls landfill doesn't accept any of that stuff anyways. So they're gonna have to go through that process just to get it in the city.
So all this cleanup is gonna go on down by the river, is there one other property that's gonna get cleaned up at the same time?
Well, there's been, some conversations held with that individual, yeah.
They didn't all get washed down the river,
Almost.
maybe filled in again.
So no more gardens or anything of that nature, so. or next month, that President's Day, is on the 17th, so the meeting will be held on the 18th of February, on Tuesday. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Just two quick items. Attended the Chambers Board meeting here last week, and, you know, as with lots of things that go on in life, they're already talking about East egg hunts and starting even to talk about the 4 days, so, you know, their calendar is a little bit different than ours, but we did attend that. Just wanna say thank you to our Public Works Department for dealing with the streets over this weekend, and I think they did a nice job. Before I went to church, I had to open up the end of my driveway. So I consider that a free cardiac stress test, so, anyway, but they did a good job, and things look pretty good, so, anyway. That's all I've got.
So move.
Council Member Meyer has made a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Seconded by Bill. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Thank you, people. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sorry.
Yeah,
There's gotta be a way.
you know,
Well, I think
Steps.
everybody's using this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Say what's going on at the old,
He's,
I mean, I see we got a bill here
Dan,
for
you know,
sewer.
lots of questions with
What's that?
Kristen and Leslie.
That's the,
and
the-
they, I think.
sorry, I'm tired.
they just gave
Not the old Dutch, it's the
our
apartments.
level of comfort.
It's to split the, I don't know if it was the apartment or the, what are those little houses that are out there? The little,
Trailer house?
those top things. To split those, cause they were all on one,
Yeah.
and so it was to
I know for
split
sure
those,
Leslie,
so the
she's,
individuals could pay for those.
Dealt with this
So each
before.
individual trailer house is getting built instead of.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, when she
He's-
did, you know.
That or it was the rental building above,
Anyway,
I don't remember which one